In the context of the African continent, if you just think back and you read history books, the first industrial revolution was about where people like Christopher Columbus could find spices, alternative sources of food, or alternative sources of resources. The second industrial revolution was almost the same. It was about, where do we find coal, where do we find gold, where do we find steel? The Africans were subjects of those revolutions. In the third industrial revolution, where we've seen significant growth of penetration of technology, including in the African continent, Africans started to play some role, but it was at the periphery. We cannot afford, as Africans, to be a subject again in the fourth industrial revolution. And what is going to be important here is about how do we make sure that in the context where knowledge is power, the knowledge of indigenous cultures, indigenous beliefs, indigenous solutions becomes part and parcel of what is taught in schools. Because unless we do this, we are again going to be the subject of the fourth industrial revolution. So we've got to change this as Africans, as policymakers, as governments, as entrepreneurs. And when we just think about some of the key things in human development, how we get born, how we acquire knowledge, how we're prolonging our lives, how we may be solving our problems, there have always been a lot of knowledge going back centuries in Africa. It was never documented. So we've got to change this. We've got to start documenting some of the knowledge, the beliefs, the cultures, the solutions which have always been there, and other people documented them and took them as if it was their own. And that gave them power, because knowledge is power. So we've got to change this as Africans. So we're starting to think, some of us are starting to think how we actually do this. In fact, we're not just thinking about it. We're starting to do research to document indigenous knowledge systems, which are going to be very important, because if we can proffer these as some of the solutions to the problems of the world, and we can solve some of the problems of the world, only then will we be part of this fourth industrial revolution, not as subjects, but as people who are part of solving the problems of the world going forward.